This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hello, welcome back to coffee number 5. I'm so excited to be here today because I was listening to music and I was trying to remember the name of that song that I never remember. And I asked my phone, what's this song? And then guess who showed up here? Chris Barton. Chris Barton is the creator of Shazam, and we have the honor of having him here in coffee number 5. So welcome, Chris.
Thank you for having me.
This is so exciting because, this is something that we always dream about, that being able to have the name of that song and find out what song is this. And we always had that problem, but you got a solution.
It was easier said than done, but I was able to get the solution, and it's so satisfying to see that people are using it.
Yeah. So, okay, I want to see how you came up, because we all have problems all the time. I always talk to my husband, that he's a product designer, that the best products are the ones who are fulfilling solutions to problems. And you find that problem, but not only you find that problem, you remember that problem. And you said, how was this? This is something that was happening to you a lot, that you said, I need to create a solution for this.
It was absolutely. In fact, a lot of people say to me, oh, you must be a music expert if you created Shazam. And I actually say I'm the opposite of a music expert. I know very little about music, and I have a hard time naming all the different music genres and many famous artists. And that's for that reason. For me, it was just an audio experience where I would hear tracks I like in daily life and think, oh, I really like that song. I need to find out who it is so I can add it to my favorite songs.
And you had the background, you've been working in the industry for a long time, from the beginning of I don't want to say that our age, but we've been there from the beginning of the internet world. But when we can start interacting with this new world, not only just have a website that we can go and get information, the world became interactive and we can communicate with our apps. I remember when I got my first phone that, in theory, I can say call this person. I'm talking about year 2000 here. And I don't know if it was the technology or was my accent, but it never worked together. And I will call the most random people. But you make it work, and you make it work with music. How different was to work it just with a verbal voice, and to listen to music, because it's so different. There are instruments, vocals, there's so much involved. So how different was from creating, just using a voice app?
Yeah, well, it's funny because when we started with the concept of, let's identify songs, we had no idea where to start from a technical standpoint, because the original 3, there were 2 other co-founders that I brought on board, but they were all business people like myself. So none of us had the technical background, but we had this vision to do a very difficult technical thing. And fortunately, we found a 4th co-founder who was the genius technologist with 4 degrees from Stanford and a PhD in mathematics, statistics, electrical engineering, digital signal processing. But anyway, long story short, when we actually started, the very first technical person we went to was a professor of voice recognition, focused on voice recognition at UC Berkeley. And
I would have started the same way, because that's the only thing we knew back then.
Absolutely. That was the obvious. That seemed like the closest analogy. It turned out that everything related to voice recognition was completely irrelevant for how we ended up solving this problem. It was voice recognition is what I like to call a fuzzy match. So, what you sound like when you say something is very different than what I sound like and anyone else sounds like. So it's having to match in a fuzzy way to what we're saying. With Shazam, what we created was an exact match. So what we are actually matching the song to the original song in our database, which is the exact same song, the same recording as what's being played on the radio or in a bar or club, because a single print gets made of that song, a digital print of the recording in the studio. And so that's what we're matching against. And in fact, our match is it's like a DNA match to someone's DNA, right? And so you might see 2 twins that look very similar, but their DNA might be slightly different. So that was the art form of what we accomplished. And to give you a sense for that, of how oriented it was towards this exact match. If you had the London Symphony Orchestra perform a classical piece of music 5 times, it would sound identical to you and I. But if those 5 recordings were in our database, we would always match to the exact recording that you're playing. So so to you and I, it would sound identical, but to our algorithm, they would sound very different.
Yeah, even for musicians, they can tell when something was different. It's amazing, and it's incredible what you achieve with this app. But I want to move a little more in your professional life, because you left Shazam and now you're a keynote innovator, or you talk about innovation. And this is something that always fascinates me. I mean, of course, I go to conferences and I'm always looking at innovation products. We are in this world of bringing something new, because this is what people want to buy. And as a marketer, we're trying to sell it. But you speak about innovation, you inspire people, you educate people about innovation. What's innovation for you?
Yeah, so innovation is more than just simply coming up with an idea. I think we're always coming up with different ideas. We as individuals and companies, as comprised of many individuals, are coming up with many ideas and actually executing on them. But what's fascinating for me are what I call breakout innovations. So the ones that are really successful, because clearly just having an innovation, if it's not a really successful innovation that is widely adopted, incredibly delightful, and achieves sort of critical momentum and success, then it's not an innovation that's as worthwhile focusing on. So what I'm fascinated by is what allows individuals in a company to lock in on and identify and follow through with those innovations. And where I come from as an entrepreneur myself, and as someone who's worked around some impressive entrepreneurial companies. I joined Google when it was a private company with 2,000 employees, and Dropbox when it was a early stage company with 90 employees, and both those companies went public subsequently. And what's fascinating to me is to watch that mindset that's often found among entrepreneurs and founders, and less often or more difficult for larger companies to keep up with. And it's mindsets that basically the entrepreneur has. It comes from its root foundation, I believe, the vulnerability that an entrepreneur has, as well as the incredible conviction an entrepreneur needs to be able to stick to their core ideas and see them through to a final outcome of great innovation. But it's not just coming up with the idea, it's seeing through to it. It's sticking to really being kind of what I call having immersive conviction around what the core ideas are, and even the tangent ideas that enable the outcome. Coming at things with a really fresh perspective, beginner's mind, leveraging fear. So people talk about how entrepreneurs and founders and inventors can be fearless and have no fear. But I actually think that's wrong. I think they actually have a healthy relationship with fear, a constructive relationship with fear that actually supercharges the outcome. I mean, Google spent, in its early years building more and more moats to protect the business, and that comes from fear. And actually the original idea for Shazam also came from fear of being sort of disrupted if I had built my original concept. So it's all these kind of sort of different approaches of how do entrepreneurs think. The first principles, building from basic building blocks, is a method that Henry Ford, Steve Jobs, Elon Musk all use. These kind of unique ways of thinking that's often found among entrepreneurs that can be widely adopted by companies to have greater success with innovations.
I love that you said it's not about the idea only, it's about to make it happen. Because I have so many people that comes to me with ideas, and how can I do it? Well, there is a development stage, and it doesn't happen most of the times from one place, 1 minute to the next. There is a lot to be done, a lot to be studied, and like it happened to you with Shazam, you had to go and maybe knock a lot of doors and get a lot of information when you come with a new concept. If it wouldn't be an innovation, it would be easy. It's been done already. You can copy someone else's formula.
Yep. Yeah, a great example, by the way, is I'll just, if you take two parallel things, is take Shazam, and then we had an early follower competitor, which is a very large company called Philips, and they basically did the same thing. They copied us. They've invented an algorithm that identified songs, but then there were big differences. So you have the idea, and then you have the actual execution. And so when it came to build a giant music database, Shazam did it, and it was incredibly difficult. Philips said, oh, that's too hard. Let's just license the technology to other people and let them do it. And guess what? No one wanted to do it. And then, we had to partner with the mobile operators to create this user experience. Again, Philips didn't want to do it. So it's seeing through from the idea and seeing all the way through to the end game of how do you get to a really successful outcome, constantly staying obsessed with how do you delight the user, and then how do you drive all the way to getting there.
I love that you say about delighting the user, because user experience, it's something so important in anything we do, in any market today. From selling a candy and make a packaging that it would be easy to open, to use an app that it's easy to use and actually work. So there's a lot of, I always say that as an entrepreneurs, we are risk managers, because we always assessing, okay, if I do this, what will happen with this? Because it's also a domino effect. And if you're fixing part of the technology, it can affect other part of the technology. If you having more people in the team, can affect you in a way, and your budget. So you're always assessing what will work best for you and making decisions. But when you come from the innovation part, there are so many factors that you don't know, and you need to make them happen. So how can you prepare yourself for the unknown?
Gosh, preparing for the unknown. I think it's preparing for the unknown is just living in the unknown. Really, it's accepting that you're constantly learning, and that while you might have a specific vision and a specific focus, that you always have to keep an open mind to sort of allowing yourself to take in new information and reposition your thinking. But I think that it's also a realization that to achieve that delightful outcome for the end user requires more than one often expects. You have to go to sort of superhuman levels to get to that. I like to say, simplicity and a simple experience is obviously one that is really important to users. But that often, to get to that simple experience, it's not just a matter of design, it's actually a matter of executing very, very complicated, complex solutions.
And let me ask you one more question. It's an innovator means reinventing the wheel, or means making the wheel work better? How does it work?
It can be either one. In fact, I think an innovator is, one thing to keep in mind is we tend to think of innovators as focused on these sort of core products that, the iPhone, the Tesla car, and so on. But great innovation takes place across the board. It takes place in sort of business processes. It can take place in business models. And often those are the innovations that we're less aware of, but they're still game changing in terms of the impact that they have on us. We just don't see them. So, for example, when I was at Google, I was amazed to see that the lawyers innovated the way non-disclosure agreements were created. And the finance people innovated the way that stock options were issued and monetized by employees. So this and Google itself, one of the fascinating things when I first joined is they had innovated not only search and ads, but they innovated the way that the ads would be monetized, the way they'd be ranked and prioritized in the user experience. They innovated that as well. So the business model. So it's sort of this innovation that takes place sort of across the board. And it's not just sort of inventing a product or improving a product. It literally is much broader than that. Sort of it's across products, services, business processes, sort of almost every aspect of the inputs of a business.
Normally, people really think that innovation is connected with technology. And it's great that you're clarifying that it's not. It can come from any point and any place. And I'm thinking like even the way that we do business, and that if you change some processes in any kind of business, can take you one part to another part of innovation.
Yep.
because everything works as an ensemble. So it's a domino effect.
Absolutely. It's a domino effect. Yeah. Yeah. And it's, and so you're constantly evolving. I think one of the key, mindsets to have is just to always have an open mind and always be looking for improvements. You're never at the final outcome. Kind of like an artist with a painting, there's always a little, maybe there's something else they can improve. There's something else that can be changed. There's some other new perspective.
Many innovations start from one crazy entrepreneur, and they have this crazy idea, and then if it works well, the company grows. Is it harder to bring the innovation to companies that they already have so many logistics in place and that they have so many levels of people? Or, I mean, you work in very large companies like Google. And so is it harder to bring innovation to those teams?
I definitely think there's definitely the unique challenges of a larger organization and all the constituents that need to buy in, support causes and initiatives within companies creates more friction than a small nimble startup has, where the founders and the passionate early employees can really steer things very quickly. And so it's the realization of that, and then the reacting to it and setting up processes and setting up sort of approaches that big companies need to be aware of to make sure that they're capturing all the value that nimble startups can.
There is anything that big companies or C-level executives can do to say, okay, I'm taking a step back and I'm thinking about like that entrepreneur?
Yeah, I think it's enabling the constituents. So because innovation is not done by companies, it's done by people in companies, and it's enabling those people to be able to think differently, to question things, to do things differently, despite the fact that it might be sort of unorthodox and might not have widely accepted sort of support or consensus at that point. So you're really kind of empowering them to be independent and think differently. I was part of the Android team at Google in its very early days, and the founders did that very well. They enabled the Android team which was an acquired little startup, to execute on their vision and really act in a very sort of solo fashion of how would they achieve the success without having to constantly build this sort of consensus across the organization.
So back then, when you're working in your project, Shazam, when was that moment when the penny dropped and you say, I'm innovating? Do you remember that moment, that aha moment that you said, I'm changing something in history?
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that. I felt the moment I had the idea, I felt that. Because, so I always like to say, by the way, that the idea for Shazam was not, hey, let's identify songs. People say, oh, was that your breakthrough idea? That's incredible. And I always like to say, no, that's not a breakthrough idea. Actually, many people had that idea. In fact, there were about 7 companies that are already working on trying to do it, and even launching these services, but they were all doing existing known technologies, a much easier solution. So monitoring radio stations, and all these offerings basically told you what's playing on a radio station if you told it which radio station you were listening to. So the breakthrough idea for Shazam was, what if we could do it with a sound in the air? Because at that time, although phones were not smartphones, they all had 2 things. All mobile phones had 2 things. They had a microphone that captured sound, and they had an ability to receive text messages. And I just knew that if I have a microphone and an ability to send a text message, I can create this experience where it would just capture audio in the air and then send a text message with the name of the song. That was the original form of Shazam. And so as soon as I came up with that idea, I felt like this is it. This is going to be huge. I mean, it really felt like I can see a day when huge portions of the world are using this. And today we've reached, way over 1 billion users, over 1 billion downloads. And, in many of the years of Shazam, we'd have 8 million new users joining every month, downloading Shazam, without any marketing, by the way, just word of mouth.
Well, yeah, I mean, it was a perfect solution. I mean, we all have that problem of the song. And I remember a friend telling me, use Shazam. What? And Shazam, and then I found out into Shazam, and I was hooked. And then, of course, I told the next person who had the same problem. So the idea, how do you know that it's that idea that it will make it? Do you
Yeah,
put all your eggs in one basket when you believe in that idea?
you do. I think you do. And I think, and it's such a great question that you asked, because there's obviously no website where you can type it in and it will tell you, yes, this is a good idea or that's a bad idea. You can do your own informal tests. And we did do things. We actually, in the early days of Shazam, before we had any money raised, we would literally go to shopping malls with a little piece of paper and just ask people, would you use a service that did the following thing? And Dropbox did things like that in its early days as well, with a little video that they put on the internet. So you can do little early tests to see what people, how well received different ideas are. But I think a lot of it comes from the heart and just your gut instinct of really sort of, I mean, famously Apple and Steve Jobs were led behind the idea you can't just survey your way to the right answer. If you survey your way to the right answer, you'll end up with a lot of these kind of substandard products. Sometimes you just have to know what you have to see ahead of the user and kind of know what would really delight them. And that comes, I think, largely from just trying to really get into your basic building block thinking and think, well, what really delights a user? What are their problems, and what would be delightful, and what is possible? What could we build? And then when you come up with things, you can kind of think, this meets all those goals. It satisfies and it delights the end user. It's feasible. It might be very difficult, but you kind of get a gut instinct for what is going to be game changing in terms of what's worthwhile investing to build and create.
We all have that nagging voice, the one that I'm talking about, that when it's starting that, because being an entrepreneur, being an innovator is a lonely place. It's you against the world, and the world saying, I mean, how many people say, I don't know about this idea, and you want to keep it to yourself because you don't want to share it too much. And at the same time, it's tough. You get judged because it happens. So it's impossible not to have that little nagging voice telling you, what if this doesn't work? What if? And also when we're working with technology, because I'm sure that this happened to you, that you try to go one way and you say, it's not working. You just hit the wall. But you need to be a believer and move to the another way. How you keep going?
Yeah, I think you become, what I personally experienced is I became very locked in on my vision for the outcome, this just beautiful, wonderful, delightful, highly reliable experience. And I let that nagging feeling that you're talking about, I let it be with me. I mean, I like to say, I embraced the fear. And that actually kept me thinking about, okay, what can I solve for? What could be new problems? How do we solve for those problems? And all the problems along the way, ironing them all out. In the case of Shazam, it was sort of like, oh, what happens if there's a DJ changing the speed of the music? What happens if there's a lot of noise in a bar? What happens if the song, the mobile phone is, limited in its capabilities and so on. So there's a lot of that, but it's that kind of thinking. And I know the Dropbox guys, they were very focused on that as well, sort of like ironing out all the details so that it would really work. It just works. And obsessing with that and letting the nagging feeling be a reminder of how you have to keep on solving problems.
And how important is, once you have the innovation, to keep innovating the innovation? Because one thing is to have the product, it's out there, Shazam been there for a long time now, it's a household name, but you always need to be improving. Always need to be, there are new technologies, new competitions. How you go, like, what else can I do? Do you do customer research? What do you do just to know how can I improve my product?
I think you partly identify where the weaknesses are, what are the things that are not good enough, and how can you solve them? You partly brainstorm kind of what could be some new delightful things. Like we at Shazam, we created this thing where we synchronize lyrics. So you would identify the song and you look at your phone and you're seeing the words of the song as you're hearing them on the speaker that's disconnected to your mobile phone. That's sort of up on the roof in the bar, club, cafe, theater, wherever you are. So, that was a neat kind of new feature that kind of wowed consumers. So you're solving problems, and then also you're staying up to date with what the technological trends are. There's always new platforms, new new impacts on the world that are coming. And there were many of those that happened with Shazam. Again, I mean, the iPhone being a big one, right? That was the iPhone App Store was 8 years after the inception of Shazam. So writing that curve and just building an app as an experience for Shazam, that was a very easy thing to do for Shazam relative to all the music recognition we had built. But of course, building the app was very important for creating a wonderful user experience in the new world of apps.
But also then is maintaining the up to date, because you have iOS that it changes, Android, so you need to maintain up to date and make sure that everything is working fine.
And making it faster and faster. Speed was always an important thing for Shazam, and it wasn't a big obsession at Google as well. Having a fast experience, reliability of the algorithm for identifying the songs and across a lot of music. Having very obscure music from every country and from small bands as well as big bands. So all these things were important, and always thinking about, what are new things we can do. I mean, for example, another example is that we thought, sometimes when people identify songs, there actually is no mobile phone reception. They're down in a nightclub and there's actually no signal. And so Shazam would just, we would create a new technical solution for that, where we'd capture the sound. And then next time you get to connectivity, then it would send it off to Shazam and send you the result of the song, so you don't lose it.
Bummer, I thought you were going to talk about karaoke. Get the karaoke version.
No, that's one thing. That's one path that we thought about, but never went down, the whole kind of humming and singing approach, which is a whole nother use case. But you do have to pick and choose your battles as well. That's another very important thing for every innovator. You clearly cannot do everything that you think of. You do have to pick what you think are the most important ones to focus on.
Yeah, and what do you believe in your gut feeling?
I'm sorry?
Do you believe in your gut feeling, or do you believe in data?
I do believe strongly in the gut feeling, and because a lot of these things, they can't be measured or assessed in any sort of analytical way, because there is no information out there. So that gut feeling is ultimately really all you have to go on for some of those big decisions.
So before we go, my last question is, someone who is there, has an idea, and they don't know, because there's so many people with great ideas, but they don't know where to start. What will be your recommendation?
I always think that the first starting point is, I always like to say, is learn from what's already out there as much as you can. So one thing I found is almost every idea, or many ideas, you would often be surprised to find have been thought of by other people. It's just that it may not be famous. And so I always like to suggest to every entrepreneur or anyone kind of trying to pursue a new idea is go find the needle in the haystack. Go find the other 1 or 2 or 3 people that have thought of that idea and even tried to build a little product or raise a little bit of money, or maybe it was even built within a company, and go get in touch with that person, go have coffee with them. And obviously it flopped by that point, most likely. And then just learn from what they learned, find out what worked, what didn't work, what did they try. And it doesn't mean just because it flopped with them that it's not going to work with you. I mean, Amazon was the 16th bookstore on the web, so the first 15 didn't work very well. But it is very worthwhile to go learn from the people that have already tried, rather than just making the same mistakes that they made.
Yeah, and also before you go out there, do your research. Make sure that nobody's doing it already. And if you're going to do it, I mean, it's okay, but then it's not something different. It's done, and it's okay to compete. It's okay. Pepsi and Coca-Cola live in the same world, but it's okay. But know what's out there.
No, it's out there, yeah. And then it's okay to compete. And it's also, if you have confidence in yourself, you're probably you're going to do a better job than your competition. So it doesn't mean you shouldn't do it because someone's doing it. But just do it very well. Yeah,
exactly. But do your research before you start, because it's really disappointing to find, after you put a lot of effort, to find out that someone is doing it, and also the research is there for you done.
It's already been done. Yeah, and you'd be amazed at how many entrepreneurs I meet that have an idea, they're working on it, they're trying to build little beta versions of it, minimum viable products and so on, but they haven't yet bothered going out and learning from the fact that there was another company that actually raised $15 million to do it, and they hadn't yet even reached out to anyone from that company. That's very common, and that's a big mistake.
Yeah, as I told everyone, they know my husband is a product designer. So do you know how many people always come to him with ideas of products? And he always asks them the same thing. Did you research? Did you see if they are out there? And so far, 100% of the response so far were, yes, there was a version out there. It doesn't mean that you should stop and not do it. You can always modify it if you have a new concept. But
Yep.
Learn from what is out there already and what you can do better.
Yep, absolutely. I think it's just like when you're in school, the very first thing you do is you research a project, right, before you write the essay. It is amazing to me how few people realize how important that is in the real world as well. I think it's because it's difficult. Again, it is a little bit like finding a needle in a haystack. It's not just going to come up on your first Google search. So it does require some digging and networking, but it's worth the effort.
And also, I think that there is this kind of thought out there that being an entrepreneur is not having to work hard.
They got that wrong. They better do some research.
Yeah, I think as an entrepreneur, you work harder than anyone. You are concerned more than anyone, and you invest a lot of time and you make a lot of mistakes. But I mean, research for me is fundamental in anything we do.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's not you definitely do have to work hard, but what you do get the benefit of all that hard work feels like fun. It doesn't feel like work because you're so passionate about it.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for having coffee with me. I really enjoyed this talk.
And I really had my coffee, by the way.
Yeah, here we are.
Thank you so much, Lara. I really enjoyed it.
And to you guys, I will see you with more coffee number 5 next week. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.